Okay, so in a way, I have a serious topic, but in another way, I'm just going to talk about what we always talk about every Sunday, everything we do. We always stand up here, whoever's the presider stands up here and begins, like Jan did, by saying, there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it. We say it so often. It just kind of slips into the background. And you probably take it for granted now when you hear it, it barely registers. Just like you, this is funny, I wrote this. Just like you take for granted that there's coffee in the lobby, but where's the coffee today? It's in the kitchen, okay. You know, it all works. But there's a reason why we do say it every Sunday. It summarizes our entire teaching in one sentence. It's New Thought in a nutshell, so to speak. Now, a few minutes ago, Jim read a list of concepts that ErnestHolmes wrote down when he was asked to summarize what we believe. But where did those ideas come from? What is it that we teach? Well, Holmes wrote in the Science of Mind text that the study of science of mind is a study of first cause, spirit, mind, or that invisible essence, that ultimate stuff and intelligence from which everything comes, the power back of creation, the thing itself. To him, Holmes, it was self-evident that since we exist, there must be something behind our existence. He didn't need any explanation. It was all self-evident. He just thought, he just accepted that since we exist, there must be something behind our existence, some kind of an explanation for our existence. And it didn't really matter to him what you called it. So he was willing to call it God, but not with that old-fashioned meaning of a supreme being outside of life or separate from life, you know, the grand puppeteer master. Not that idea of God at all. And so often he would refer to this divine spirit, God, as creative mind, or as the thing itself, or as the power for good. Sometimes, especially later, he just called it life, this thing called life. Now, ErnestHolmes, who was the founder of our teaching, was a teacher, and he was a healer, and he said right up front that what we teach has been known and taught by others for millenniums. He spoke of his own work as being kind of like a gold miner, searching through the works of earlier philosophers and other religions to find the veins of truth, the common veins of truth that they held despite their other differences of opinion. Holmes never claimed to be a prophet. He never even claimed to be a mystic, although I think after you study him for a while, you'll say, yeah, he was a mystic too. He simply presented himself like we do here, as being a student, a discoverer, and a teacher of new thought principles as he understood them. So he was born in rural Maine in 1887. That's quite a while ago. He lived in Boston, and then he moved to Venice, California, where he became a noted speaker on metaphysics. He wrote many books, beginning with Creative Mind in 1919. And later on, he wrote The Science of Mind. Now, he was greatly influenced by the American transcendentalist Emerson. And as Dan said, Dr. Carol Carnes is going to be speaking here starting June 8th. She wrote a book on Emerson as it pertains to New Thought. So we've ordered a few. So, you know, it really is tied in very closely with our teaching. Holmes was originally actually ordained as a divine science minister. So, you know, we do quite a bit of readings and things from divine science. There is a connection there too. So he was ordained in 1917. And then in 1925, he went to New York and he studied with Emma Curtis Hopkins. So he was one of her very last students. And she is the person who had also trained the founders of the Unity Church. Well, it was after his time spent studying with her that he actually sat down and wrote the first version of The Science of Mind, and right away founded the Institute of Religious Science and School of Philosophy, which over the years has gradually evolved into our organization that we now call Centers for Spiritual Living. And Centers for Spiritual Living is part of the broader New Thought movement. And that includes divine science, it includes unity, and it also includes a few other smaller organizations and independent New Thought centers. And to a great degree, they teach the same things that we do. That there is only one thing, God or Spirit, and that it is good and good only. Now, when ErnestHolmes would speak or give classes, he would sometimes have over 1,000 people in attendance. And I recommend, if you haven't done so, that you listen to one of his radio shows. You can hear them on the internet or Spotify or iTunes. They're short. They're geared to a general audience, not necessarily people who have been studying New Thought for a while. But his personality comes through. And you can see that people must have responded to him because he just had a manner that was very cheerful, very clear, and an era of kindness. So, even though, as far as I know, Holmes never bragged about himself or his accomplishments, by the time he was writing The Science of Mind, it was easy for him to say, we accept this thing, the thing itself. We accept that it exists, and we believe in it. Well, that's fine for him, but what about you? Do you believe that there is something back of this experience of livingness that we are all having? You know, and I'm sure that probably you all do, but suppose you have some doubts. Suppose you're not exactly so sure, like Holmes, that you should just accept this idea that there is a spiritual beingness underlying our day-to-day experience. What if you have some reservations? And I know that over the years we have had people who have come to our center who have been raised atheists. They don't come with this idea that there's a God or creator. They come out of curiosity. But the thing is, here, we don't expect that anyone just believes what I'm standing up here and saying, or the list that Jim read off, or just accepts everything that has been written by the authors who are now in our bookstore. Because when we speak and use the term science of mind or religious science, it doesn't just mean, and it really doesn't mean at all, that we're looking into the sciences of physics or chemistry or biology to tell us what to believe. And we like and appreciate the other sciences. But the reason why we use the term science ourselves is that we are advocating and recommending taking a scientific approach to religion. Take a scientific approach to using your mind. Take a scientific approach to the whole study of metaphysics, the study of that which is above, beyond, or behind the spiritual world. Because, as Holmes put it, and I agree, there is nothing supernatural about the study of life or the spiritual life. We should approach it, as Holmes said, normally, happily, willing to accept, glad to experiment, hoping and believing that as the result of our efforts we shall each derive great good, and he means that we will each get great good out of our study when we get a sound understanding of the natural laws of life as they apply to the individual and their relationship to the whole universal scheme of things. He claimed that which seems to us supernatural, after it is thoroughly understood, will be found to be spontaneously natural. So, in examining the nature of spirit, we don't take things on blind faith. We don't want you to take things on blind faith either. Instead, we should use our personal intelligence to follow a scientific or logical method of investigation. Ask questions. Why are things a certain way? Do some research. Gather some facts. Come up with a hypothesis, a possible explanation, and then figure out a way to test whether that's true or false. Come up with an experiment. Try it out. You know, these experiments can be done physically in a material way, and they can also be done through thinking, through a process of logic, you know, kind of following through if things make sense. And then after our time of experimentation, we ought to analyze our results. We ought to make conclusions, and then hopefully we can share it with each other. That's one big reason why we come here on Sunday. How are you doing? How did your week go? Well, the most amazing thing happened. Or I struggled with this. Do you have any suggestions? We communicate. We share our findings with each other, and then we can all, individually or together, move on. Move on to our next question. Dig even deeper into the subject. So, I just want to give you a silly example, right? If you wanted to ask the question, what happens to the world when I close my eyes? Test. Close your eyes. And see if you still are aware of the floor underneath you, or did everything disappear, right? It sounds silly, and of course, we're all advanced in years, and so it is kind of silly. But if you've ever seen a child play peekaboo for the first time, There was a moment, I know, in each one of our lives where we wondered, oh, when I close my eyes, are they still there? And it's so exciting for them when you go, peekaboo, I'm still here. And they'll do it over and over and over again to test it. That's experimentation, and it can be a lot of fun. So maybe for us, suppose you wanted to ask a harder question, like, does doing an affirmation actually affect anything? You know, we teach people do affirmations, positive thinking, blah, blah, blah. Does it really do anything? How could you set up a test? So one of the easiest ways, if you're driving a car, is next time you go into a busy parking lot, do an affirmation like, I know I easily find the perfect parking place right now. Try it. Don't just try it once. Try it 10 times. Do you find that parking place 1 out of 10 times? Do you find it 8 out of 10 times? Do you find it 10 out of 10 times? I mean, even if this seems silly, try it. Keep track of it. And then if it works sometimes, but not other times, what's the next question? Well, from my own experience, in this particular example, I can tell you it's usually my mood. You know, so if I'm doing an affirmation, I find the perfect right parking place, and it's followed up by, oh my gosh, why did everyone have to have the same idea that I had? Right? A little bit of not happening. So these are things that we can find out by testing it, by paying attention. The whole idea is, when we say we're awakening to our spiritual magnificence, we're also awakening to what's going on. Where are we? What are we doing? What do we want to be doing? Generally speaking, Holmes and other New Thought teachers understood that although it may seem like one person prays and has a result, and another person prays and does not see a result, it isn't because God or this thing itself responds to one person and not to another person. Not what's happening. So, think of it this way. Suppose 2 people each decide they're going to bake a loaf of bread using the same oven. One loaf is delicious, and the other loaf is not delicious. I've made a few of those. Does that mean that the oven played favorites? Did the oven like one person's loaf of bread better than the other person's loaf of bread? No, that wasn't it. The oven didn't play favorites. It probably just meant that one baker had more experience or used fresher ingredients, right? We all know that happens. Or one person, you know, got the yeast that had been in the back of the refrigerator for 3 years and oops, didn't work. Well, God, the thing itself, doesn't play favorites either. It's completely reliable. It isn't a random force. It responds equally to everyone all of the time. The difference in our results is simply because there is a difference in our thinking. Our thoughts are constantly creating the recipe or the mold, the idea that spirit responds to. It responds in accord with our thoughts. And spirit responds with the same harmony and consistency, whether you're thinking, oh my gosh, I woke up this morning and my back hurts so much, I'm going to stay home. Or you wake up and you think, oh, I have a little something in my back. I think I'm going to do some stretching and I'll be great. Spirit responds equally to both thoughts. Okay, that's what's happening today. Spirit always responds with a harmony, a consistency, and a general orderliness. That's why we talk about it acting through a law, through a sense of harmony or dependable. You can count on it. And that's why we also say that Spirit only says yes. I mean, it's not really saying yes, but it's easy for us since we talk to each other and we say yes and no, that Spirit is only operating in the affirmative. But we're the ones who are choosing. We choose, we accept. And, of course, what we know, and I'm sure you know this already, is some of our thoughts are conscious, and then we also have this whole amazing bank of unconscious thoughts that are also in play, right? So, whether we're aware of it or not, Holmes explained that the answer to the question, why are some people healed through prayer while others are not, is that it simply depends on the belief and the willingness of the person making the prayer or doing the spiritual mind treatment. So this week, I'm just bringing it up to try to clarify that even though we may struggle with life, God is still good. And next week, I'm going to come back to this topic and talk a little bit about our role, how we can use this power for good more consciously and really see our lives begin to move down the path that we desire. So when I say that God is good, at the same time, at the very same time, unless you're still like 1 week old, you already know and you have had experiences that are not good, right? So God is good, but that doesn't mean like everything happening in my life is actually good. And we don't want anyone to gloss over misfortune or to say that this I hear this a lot. Don't fool yourself into thinking that bad stuff happens for a good reason. Yeah, there may be a silver lining, but we don't want to invite having to search for the silver lining all the time. We just want to have good stuff happen as much as possible because, you know, it's not just for us. It's what we bring into the world. That's what we're putting out into the world. You know, so what we're trying to teach is when something happens that we don't like, that we think is bad or evil or something, let's look at that. Let's figure it out. Let's take a scientific approach and see how we can get back on track. Because we believe not only that God is good, we also believe that there is good for us. And we also believe that we ought to have it. Isn't that what was meant by the biblical phrase, consider the lilies of the field? If life is generous to nature, why on earth wouldn't life be generous to us? Why would we be isolated out to like, oh yeah, the lilies of the field, they're beautiful, but you humans, nah. No, that's not how it works. Life is always an expansion. We can see it all around us. There's always growth. You know, we've even been told that the physical universe itself is expanding. There appears to be an unending cycle or spiral of life that takes place in the world of nature. And we see that it is amazing and it looks good, it is good. But what about humanity? What about our long history of humanity? You know, there's a saying that history doesn't really repeat itself, but it rhymes. Like the world of nature, the world of humanity, or the consciousness of the human race, let's call it the shared consciousness of the human race, also seems to follow a rhythmic pattern, ever spiraling onward, in the same way as nature. An unending spiral of life, and it is also something amazing and something good, despite any appearances to the contrary. This spiraling and ongoing expansion of life is constantly demonstrating the power of good firsthand. You just have to open your eyes to it. You know, there really is only one thing. I like to think of it as beingness. We say that this thing creates by becoming. It is never used up in any way. It is never diminished. And it is never separated. So as when we call ourselves individualizations of spirit, we're not separate. There's never any loss of connection. We do understand we're not all of spirit, but we are unique and on this wonderful path, which is always unfolding toward the good. The other way that we know that this thing, and this is more of a mental, logical thing that you can work with, or you can study the writings of Thomas Chard. He goes into it a lot, which is the idea that if the thing itself were not good, it would have collapsed. That the nature of it is growth, unfolding, and so if its nature were negative, it would just be, we wouldn't be able to exist. We would devolve into chaos and it would be over, right? I mean, that's a logical thing that I'm not going to go into more today because I know how much people enjoyed studying Thomas Chard. I'm not going to make you, I'm not going to go back to the original source on that. But it's good. I recommend it, you know. Just read it aloud. That's my clue. But the thing is, I'm bringing this up because maybe you struggle like I really did when I started studying this teaching. This was like the biggest, like I couldn't accept it, but eventually I worked it out. You know, because you may struggle to admit that there's no power of evil. Because we look out into the world and we see evil things happening. But in every case, the evil happens because we humans are free. We're free to use the power of good for all kinds of stuff. And if we're not thinking clearly, if we don't, you know, we're not what I'd call sensible, we make a lot of mistakes. And some people make mistakes that seem very evil or seem very harmful to others. And the truth is that when we misuse the power of good, there are real consequences. And when we use it, there are also real consequences. You know, just take War and Peace as an example. Nobody wants war. We want peace. War is like a man-made hurricane ripping through our lives. And the truth is, it's humans that generate war. It's not our creator. It's not nature. And what you find, and this is why it's nice to look back at history over a long span of time and see that eventually humans settled down. We manage to settle our disagreements, and then we find ourselves back at peace. Peace is the natural condition of humanity, and we always revert back to peace. We always revert back to the truth of who we are, spiritual beings, having a human experience in freedom, able to make choices, able to learn lessons, able to learn to express the highest love. There truly is a power for good, and we really do use it. We're always using it. So, in closing, I just want to say, today, this moment right now, is the perfect time to take a scientific approach to building your faith step by step with an open mind, by choosing well, by choosing wisely, and by paying attention to what's going on. That is my explanation of why we say there is a power for good, and so it is. Thank you.
So it is.